Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. Ridge apologizes to Brooke and tells her 5 words through tears. Brooke was hospitalized. Ridge Forrester's bravery and fast thinking will be rewarded, as Brooke will be alright after this water rescue. Brooke will live to tell the tale and recover swiftly, but she will be transported to the hospital after this adventure. Ridge may insist on having Brooke checked out by a doctor to demonstrate his caring side. Ridge's attention will undoubtedly be drawn to Brooke, so he will adore her and ensure that she is inspected as soon as possible. Ridge's defenses to prevent a Brooke reunion have clearly crumbled. Ridge's heart will be bursting with the old sensations that have returned, and he will have to cope with them in the upcoming episodes. Hope will still be with Liam Spencer at Bill Spencer's house when he receives a surprising phone call. According to B&B spoilers, Brooke will call Hope with frightening news. Of course, knowing that Brooke will be making the call should put Hope at rest. At the very least, Hope will know that Brooke is fine and can have this chat with her. Even yet, Hope will be stunned when she learns that Brooke fell off Nick Marone's boat and may have been in terrible jeopardy without Ridge's help. Brooke may hail Ridge as a hero and reassure Hope that her hospitalization is merely a precaution. By the time Hope disconnects from Brooke, she may feel a little better about things. Brooke may claim that everything is fine and then hang up, assuring that she will be home soon. Hope will tell Liam what she heard from Brooke, so he will be as shocked as she is by the danger that has erupted in Naples. Hope will tell Liam the same chaotic story, which may eventually twist gears and make him ponder whether this is a blessing in disguise for Brooke's romantic future. Hope may eventually determine that fate has found a way to reunite Brooke and Ridge, so keep an eye out for additional information regarding their destiny. Brooke's dimly lit living room wasn't merely an absence of sound, it was a physical entity, thick and suffocating, saturated with decades of love and betrayal, hope and despair, clinging like cold fog to the opulent furnishings that suddenly seemed like relics from a life lived by strangers. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows, blurring the glittering lights of Los Angeles below into a smear of weeping color, a fitting mirror to the storm raging within Ridge Forrester as he stood before her. A man utterly undone, the formidable designer, the scion of fashion royalty, reduced to a trembling silhouette against the stormy glass, his usual aura of confident intensity shattered into a million irreparable shards. He'd come unannounced, driven by a desperation that overrode pride or planning, and now, facing the profound, wounded stillness in Brooke's eyes that had once gazed upon him with adoration so pure it felt like sunlight, now clouded with a sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. The carefully constructed walls he'd spent years fortifying crumbled into dust. The weight of it all, the cumulative avalanche of his choices, his justifications, his retreats into resentment, his catastrophic inability to truly trust the woman who had given him everything, crashed down upon him with the force of a collapsing mountain. The repeated weddings ending in bitter divorces, the betrayals both real and perceived that festered like poison, the cruel accusations flung in moments of blind rage, the devastating fallout over Hope's paternity that had cleaved their world apart, the unforgivable moment he'd walked away from their last marriage ceremony, leaving her utterly humiliated and alone, the years spent orbiting each other in a painful dance of longing and recrimination, the flickers of reconciliation always extinguished by the ghosts of past hurts or fresh wounds inflicted by his own stubborn pride or her own understandable defenses, and the most recent, jagged wound. His visceral, disproportionate reaction to her moment of weakness with Deacon, a reaction born not of righteous anger, but of his own deep-seated, corrosive fear of inadequacy, his terror that he could never truly be enough for her, a fear that manifested as cruelty rather than vulnerability. Seeing her now, the profound fatigue etched into the delicate lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders held a burden he had helped place there, the absolute absence of the fiery Logan spirit that had always drawn him like a moth to flame, replaced by a quiet, terrifying resignation, was a sight more devastating than any angry confrontation. It was the visual echo of his own soul's devastation, the final, irrefutable proof of the destruction he had wrought. A tremor started deep within him, a seismic shift that traveled up his spine, shaking his broad shoulders, and then, as if a dam holding back an ocean of regret finally burst, the tears came, not the controlled, angry tears of past arguments, but a raw, uncontrollable torrent, silent rivers carving paths through the stubble on his cheeks, each drop a heavy, liquid testament to a pain too vast for words, his breath hitching in ragged, broken gasps that filled the heavy silence, his body seeming to fold in on itself under the unbearable weight of his own culpability. He took a faltering step towards her, not in pursuit, but in abject surrender, his hand reaching out instinctively before falling limply back to his side, a gesture aborted by the sheer magnitude of his unworthiness, his gaze locked onto hers, pleading, drowning, searching for any flicker of the old connection in the desolate landscape her eyes had become. The apology wasn't a single statement, it was the entire atmosphere he brought with him, the rain-streaked windows reflecting his shattered image, the tremors racking his frame, the silent tears etching paths of profound remorse down his face, the utter collapse of his formidable persona into pure, unvarnished grief, the years of shared history hanging like a shroud between them, heavy with the scent of forgotten anniversaries, broken promises, and the lingering ghost of champagne from the glass he'd shattered the night he'd left her at the altar. He opened his mouth, but the words that usually flowed so easily, the cutting remarks, the defensive arguments, the passionate declarations, all died before they could form, choked by the sheer, suffocating reality of the devastation he saw reflected back at him in her stillness. All that emerged was a raw, whispered sob, a sound wrenched from the very core of his being, primal and broken. Then, summoning a Herculean effort that seemed to cost him the last vestiges of his strength, his voice, thick with tears, cracked the suffocating silence, each word falling like a heavy stone into a still pool, distinct, irrevocable, saturated with a finality that echoed through the room, through the years, through the very marrow of their intertwined, tortured existence. I broke us beyond repair. 5 words. 5 simple, devastating words that carried the weight of a lifetime of love and failure. They hung in the air, shimmering with the salt of his tears, not an excuse, not a plea for understanding, but a stark, agonizing confession of ultimate responsibility, an admission that shattered any lingering illusion that their fractures could be mended, that the beautiful, complex, impossibly resilient vessel of bridge could ever be glued back together. It was the surrender of hope, the acknowledgement of a ruin he alone had engineered. The impact on Brooke was visceral. She didn't flinch, didn't cry out, didn't offer comfort. Instead, a profound stillness settled over her, deeper than before, as if his words had finally, irrevocably, severed the last taut thread that had tenuously connected her heart to his. A single tear, a perfect, silent counterpart to his torrent, escaped the corner of her eye, tracing a slow, solitary path down her cheek, not in shared sorrow, but in quiet, agonizing acceptance of a truth she had long feared but hadn't fully allowed herself to believe until this very moment, spoken through tears by the only man who could break her so completely. In those 5 words, Ridge hadn't just apologized, he had pronounced the epitaph on the grand, tumultuous, impossible love story that had defined them both, leaving nothing but the chilling, rain-lashed silence of an ending finally acknowledged, the echo of something precious and irreplaceable shattered forever on the polished floor between them. Brooke Logan, a terrifying plunge from Nick Marone's boat thrusting her into a desperate struggle against the cold embrace of the deep, a moment where time dilated into pure, unadulterated panic and the surface seemed impossibly distant, yet, in that heart-stopping crisis, fate, or perhaps the undeniable pull of a love thought buried, intervened decisively in the form of Ridge Forrester, whose instincts, honed by a lifetime of both protecting and warring with this extraordinary woman, propelled him into action with a courage that banished any hesitation, his powerful strokes cutting through the waves with singular purpose, his focus laser-sharp on the one person who had always been his magnetic north, even amidst years of acrimony and separation. His hands, strong and sure, found her amidst the chaos, pulling her limp, waterlogged form from the sea's greedy grasp in a rescue that felt less like chance and more like the universe realigning, a visceral, physical manifestation of a bond that refused to be severed, no matter the walls erected or the vows exchanged with others. As he hauled her back onto solid safety, the relief washing over him was a tidal wave unto itself, mingling with a primal fear he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge in years, the terror of truly losing her, not just to another man, but to oblivion itself. The immediate aftermath was a blur of gasped breaths, dripping clothes clinging coldly to skin, and the overwhelming realization of what could have been, a shadow that would linger long after the seawater had dried. While Ridge's swift and selfless heroism ensured Brooke would indeed live to tell this harrowing tale, The ordeal had taken its inevitable toll, the shock of the fall, the terrifying immersion, the sheer physical exertion of fighting for her life, and the inevitable ingestion of seawater meant that despite her inherent resilience and the profound relief of survival, a thorough medical evaluation was not just advisable but absolutely necessary, a precautionary step Ridge would brook no argument about. His characteristic alpha demeanor, often channeled into stubbornness or control, now transformed into an unwavering shield of protective concern. He would be the immovable force ensuring she received immediate and comprehensive care, his focus entirely consumed by her well-being, his usual distractions and preoccupations evaporating like mist under the Neapolitan sun. This intense, almost singular focus on Brooke wasn't merely about duty or residual guilt, it was the unmistakable sign of the emotional fortress he'd meticulously constructed around his heart since their last painful separation, walls built of resentment, pride, and a desperate attempt to move on, crumbling spectacularly under the seismic impact of nearly losing her. The sight of her vulnerable, the feel of her weight in his arms as he carried her from danger, the sheer, blinding terror that had gripped him, it acted like dynamite on those carefully laid defenses. Old feelings, deep and potent, feelings he'd suppressed, rationalized away, or buried beneath new relationships and fresh starts, came roaring back with an intensity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, a floodgate bursting open under the pressure of mortal fear. His heart, he realized with a jolt that resonated deeper than the chill of the water, was still irrevocably Brooke's, and the coming days and episodes would force him to confront this undeniable resurgence, to grapple with the implications of a love that refused to die, a love now starkly illuminated by his own act of desperate bravery. His insistence on the hospital wasn't just medical prudence, it was the first, tangible expression of this reawakened devotion, a chance to dote on her, to hover protectively, to ensure every possible measure was taken for her recovery, his presence a constant, reassuring anchor as doctors poked and prodded, a silent declaration that, for now, his world revolved solely around her safety and comfort. Meanwhile, continents away in the familiar, luxurious confines of Bill Spencer's mansion, a very different kind of tension hummed, the quiet tension of Hope Logan Spencer and Liam Spencer seeking a moment of peace, perhaps discussing the complexities of their own intertwined lives, blissfully unaware of the tempest that had just engulfed Brooke in Italy. The tranquility of that moment was shattered abruptly by the jarring chime of Hope's phone, a sound that instantly shifted the atmosphere from calm to charged anticipation. The caller ID revealing her mother's name brought a flicker of relief, at least Brooke was calling, but that relief was immediately undercut by the unsettling nature of the news Brooke delivered, her voice likely still carrying the tremors of shock and exhaustion even through the phone line. Hearing her mother's voice, however strained, did offer Hope a crucial anchor. It meant Brooke was conscious, coherent, and able to communicate, instantly alleviating the worst, unspoken fears that leaped to mind with an unexpected call bearing unsettling news. Yet, the details Brooke relayed, the horrifying image of her mother tumbling from a boat into the vast, indifferent sea, the chilling reality of how perilously close she had come to drowning, the sheer helplessness of that scenario, sent Hope reeling, a visceral punch to the gut that momentarily stole her breath, her mind undoubtedly conjuring terrifying scenarios of what might have been. Brooke, ever the pragmatist trying to shield her daughter from undue worry, likely downplayed her own fear and emphasized Ridge's pivotal role, perhaps even calling him her hero in a tone that carried a weight beyond simple gratitude, a weight hinting at the emotional earthquake occurring within her rescuer. She would have stressed, repeatedly, that the hospital stay was purely precautionary, a necessary formality insisted upon by a relentlessly concerned Ridge, designed to ensure no hidden complications lurked beneath the surface. She probably ended the call with firm, maternal assurances, "Everything is fine, sweetheart, don't you worry, I'll be home before you know it," promises intended to soothe but which couldn't completely erase the mental image of her mother in a hospital gown after such a trauma. Hanging up, Hope would have been left in a state of suspended anxiety, the initial wave of terror subsiding into a profound, lingering disquiet mixed with overwhelming gratitude for Ridge's presence and actions. Turning to Liam, her rock and confidant, she would pour out the chaotic narrative, the boat, the fall, the near disaster, the rescue, the hospitalization, each detail landing with fresh impact as she vocalized it, forcing her to relive the shock while sharing it. Liam's reaction would mirror her own initial disbelief and horror, the sudden, violent intrusion of danger into what should have been a peaceful Italian sojourn was inherently shocking, a stark reminder of life's terrifying fragility, especially concerning someone as central to their lives as Brooke. As the immediate shock began to settle, however, a different kind of realization might dawn on Hope, a shift in perspective born from knowing her mother was safe and from understanding the profound emotional catalyst the event represented. Listening to her mother recount Ridge's actions, sensing the unspoken currents in Brooke's voice when speaking of him, and knowing Ridge well enough to understand the monumental significance of his reaction, the protective urgency, the dismantling of his emotional barriers, Hope might begin to see the terrifying accident through a different lens. The near tragedy, the life-or-death moment, had violently stripped away pretense and forced raw, undeniable truths to the surface, particularly for Ridge. Where Hope had perhaps seen only insurmountable obstacles between her parents, she might now glimpse the hand of fate, a brutal yet effective method of smashing through years of accumulated baggage and pride. The crisis hadn't just saved Brooke's life, it had potentially saved their relationship, forcibly reigniting a flame that had never truly extinguished. Hope, ever hopeful and deeply invested in her parents' happiness, especially when intertwined with her own sense of family stability, might confide in Liam this burgeoning thought, that this frightening ordeal, this brush with mortality, could paradoxically be the disguised blessing, the unexpected key that finally unlocked the door to a Brooke and Ridge reunion, a testament to the idea that destiny, however dramatically and dangerously, had indeed found a way to pull them back onto their seemingly inevitable shared path, setting the stage for intense emotional reckonings and fervent discussions about legacy, forgiveness, and the enduring, messy, powerful pull of Bridge in the episodes to come. Brooke's dimly lit bedroom, usually a sanctuary now scarred by recent betrayals, hung thick with the unsaid, a suffocating blanket woven from decades of love, passion, fierce arguments, unforgivable hurts, whispered promises shattered like glass, and the ever-present, crushing weight of history repeating itself in its most painful refrain. Ridge Forrester stood just inside the doorway, not the imposing titan of fashion or the defiantly stubborn Logan adversary, but a man utterly unraveled, his broad shoulders slumped under an invisible burden heavier than any fabric bolt, his usually sharp, commanding eyes, now red-rimmed and swimming in a sheen of genuine tears that defied his carefully constructed image of stoic control, fixed desperately on Brooke, who sat rigidly on the edge of the bed, her own beautiful face a mask of weary exhaustion, etched with the fresh wounds of his latest transgression, the specter of his impulsive, soul-destroying remarriage to Taylor Hayes looming between them like a physical entity, a monument to his profound failure and the ultimate betrayal of the complicated, yet undeniable, eternal bond they shared. The silence wasn't merely an absence of sound, it was a roaring tempest of regret, accusation, sorrow, and the deafening echo of Brooke's quiet dignity in the face of his devastating choices, a dignity that somehow cut him deeper than any scream ever could. He took a single, shuddering step forward, the movement less a stride and more a collapse in slow motion, his hand instinctively rising towards her before falling back limply to his side, a useless gesture mirroring his utter helplessness against the tidal wave of remorse crashing over him, the carefully constructed walls of justification, the armor of anger he'd wielded like a weapon against her for years, the self-righteous narratives he'd clung to through countless separations and reconciliations, all dissolved in the acidic flood of seeing her pain, her devastation, inflicted not by some external enemy, but by his own hands, his own weakness, his own catastrophic inability to escape the destructive patterns he seemed doomed to repeat, patterns that inevitably left Brooke, the woman whose very essence was intertwined with his own tumultuous existence, shattered in their wake. Tears, hot and unchecked, finally breached the dam, tracing slow, glistening paths down his stubbled cheeks, each droplet a silent testament to the profound internal fracture occurring within him. This wasn't the performative anger or the controlled frustration Brooke had witnessed countless times, this was something raw, primal, terrifying in its vulnerability, the crumbling facade of Ridge Forrester revealing the terrified, regretful core beneath, a man finally confronting the scorched earth landscape of their relationship and recognizing, with horrifying clarity, that he alone held the flamethrower. His breath hitched, a ragged, wet sound that filled the heavy air, his chest constricting as if physically resisting the words struggling to emerge, Words he knew were pitifully inadequate against the magnitude of his sins, yet were the only currency he had left in this bankrupt moment. His gaze, blurred by tears yet fiercely locked onto hers, held a desperate plea for understanding he knew he didn't deserve. A silent scream acknowledging the years of pain he'd caused, the trust obliterated time. And again, the way he'd weaponized her love and resilience against her, taking her forgiveness for granted only to shatter it once more. He swallowed hard, the sound thick and painful. His voice, when it finally emerged, was a shattered whisper, stripped bare of its usual commanding resonance, trembling with the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies and the sheer terror of this final, desperate confession. I am so sorry. Brooke. Just 5 words, 5 simple syllables, yet they carried the accumulated gravity of a lifetime of mistakes, a universe of regret compacted into a single, breathless utterance. It wasn't an explanation, not an excuse, not a plea for immediate absolution, but the purest, most distilled essence of remorse wrung from the very depths of his being, offered through tears that spoke louder than any eloquent speech ever could. I am so sorry.